Welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast on Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. I'm your host, George Kerth, here with the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Packers had a big win this weekend. Gonna miss Tyler Snyder, who, if you're watching on YouTube, you've already know he's not here today because he destroyed me in our league of record, even though I was most likely the second highest scorer. But he put up almost a record-breaking one. But gonna miss the guy. But we got a lot of stuff to get into today.
Yes, we do have a lot to get into today. We are going to look at news and notes from around the league, which honestly is mostly injuries this week. Of course, it's how it's been in the NFL the last few weeks. And we're going to look at ways to fill those injury gaps with our Week 5 waiver wire. You can check out my article on thecouchgms.com already to look at some people before, but we're going to talk about some extra people on the show. And we're actually going to give you a Thursday night football preview as well, because our second show of the week will not be back until Friday. But let's jump right into some NFL news. And as we said, NFL news is going to be led off with a lot of injuries. Why don't we start with the quarterback position? And we got Trey Lance as the starting quarterback. Maybe not the way that we wanted to, though, as Jimmy Garoppolo is expected to miss a few weeks with a calf injury. Lance played the second half of the game in Week 4 and looked very good. Put up 20 fantasy points and a half. I don't know if that pace is going to keep up, but Cody, Trey Lance, someone you want?
For sure, Trey Lance is definitely. I've been a huge Trey Lance fan. If you've been listening to this podcast all offseason, we were talking about rookies, dynasty. I've been a huge Trey Lance team. I know on a lot of my teams, I've had him on my bench. I've been stashing him. Unfortunately, in our league of record, I had to cut him just because I got too injury riddled. I needed some extra guys, and now it's coming back to bite me because I don't have him. Trey Lance is a guy I love. I'll get into that more in the breakdown of during waivers because he will be one of the guys we talk about. I'll put in some devil's advocate. He's a different style player than Jimmy Garoppolo. He's more of a move guy. He's a little bit more athletic. You have to respect his read option ability. So he changes their offense a little bit. So there can be some, that wasn't what they game planned for. So now give teams a week or two. He's still a rookie quarterback. He's going to have his ups and downs. And honestly, I could hit Deebo Samuel as open as he was on a few of those routes, especially that touchdown. I don't know what it is with Seattle. Their defense looks good, and then all of a sudden they give up a huge play, and it's like no guy within 20 feet, 20 yards, I should say. So as much hype as I have for Trey Lance, I'm just trying to temper expectations on what to expect going forward throughout the rest of the season.
Definitely. I mean, I could see them going to more of a running game as well, but their backfield's still an absolute mess. Maybe we'll see Elijah Mitchell next week. Who knows? We have to keep up with that when we get to our breakdown on Thursday, or Friday, I should say. Moving to another quarterback situation, Teddy Bridgewater suffered a concussion in the Broncos game against the Ravens in Week 4. Drew Lock did not look great, but he is a starting quarterback with a week's worth of preparation. He would probably be able to jump in and run that offense pretty well. I'm not too worried about the skill position players, but I don't think Drew Lock's somebody I would add. And we don't know Teddy Bridgewater's status quite yet for next week. We have to wait to see how the concussion protocol breaks down.
Yep, absolutely. I agree there. Another guy who is deemed week to week at the moment or waiting to hear more information is David Montgomery, running back for the Chicago Bears. All signs reports to he escaped a major injury, no ACL damage, but they're going to give him time. They're going to let him rest up. So he's considered week to week at the moment. That Bears offense, hey, it took a little bit of a step this week, compared to the 47-yard performance in week 3. Justin Fields seemed to be a little bit more in rhythm. I know there was talks that I think Bill Lazor, offensive coordinator, was actually calling plays and not Matt Nagy. Then Matt Nagy came back and said, well, everything actually comes through me. Just as like a, hey, just because I'm not calling the plays, I still know exactly what's going on, which is true. That's every head coach that doesn't call the plays. But Bill Lazor was calling the plays. But Matt Nagy did say, again, that if Dalton's healthy this week, he is the starter. Justin is the number 2. So that'll be interesting to go moving forward. And Damian Wilson is Williams, not Wilson, different player. Damian Williams is a guy we'll be talking about in a little bit.
Definitely. Don't forget the injuries that happened on Thursday Night Football as well. We have running back Joe Mixon did not play the final drive of Thursday Night Football because he has a low-grade ankle sprain. I didn't expect this to be serious. It's now come out he is listed as week to week. So that might be somebody we have to keep an eye on and potentially handcuff as well. The man there is Samaje Perine, if I'm thinking correctly.
Correct.
But we'll see what happens with Joe Mixon here later in the week. And DJ Chark did get that serious injury that we talked about during our show on Thursday. This may be time for Laviska Shenault, Cody.
Yeah, he did look good in week 3 in relief. He had, I can't even pull up the numbers right now at the minute, but he had a lot of receptions. He was even getting some deep shots down the field, which you expect from DJ Chark. So as of right now, I know the Jags offense isn't the best. They definitely relied on James Robinson against the Bengals. But Chenault is the guy there. And even when DJ Chark went out, he superseded Marvin Jones, a guy that we all considered was the safety blanket. I still tend to think Marvin Jones is the safety blanket there. But maybe we're starting to see a shift in, some of the younger guys taking over. So don't forget Laviska Chenault's name as we move forward throughout the rest of the season.
As somebody who was an advocate for Marvin Jones, this now definitely shifts more of the coverage over to him because DJ Chark was still a weapon that defenses had to worry about. Maybe defenses are going to start watching Laviska Shenault more because he is a big play threat. But the immediate number one target now is definitely Marvin Jones. That's why I'd be a little bit worried. We'll see what happens when that offense breaks out for a full week of practice without DJ Chark. Moving on to another wide receiver, we got Will Fuller is expected to miss a few weeks with a broken finger. So as soon as he comes back, he goes right back down in Miami. I don't know how exactly this will affect anything, especially until Tua comes back. That offense has kind of just been stagnant. Um, but what do you think about the whole Will Fuller situation?
Another tough break, no pun intended, for Will Fuller. Uh, Broken finger. I mean, sometimes wide receivers will play with broken fingers. Sometimes they'll take a couple weeks off. But like you said, the big thing you mentioned was, you know, the offense didn't look fantastic when Tua was out there. It has seemed to regress without him. There's not a lot of pieces on this offense that are great. I'm still holding out hope that eventually we get the Miles Gaskin breakout game. I still really like his game. I still think it's going to come eventually, but it might not be until Tua comes back. And Will Fuller is just more of a deep threat at this point. Until I see him putting up consistent numbers in this new offense, he's a guy like Mecole Hardman, Henry Ruggs. Like, they might have, a few games with 5 catches or something like that, but their bread and butter is going deep. Their bread and butter is catching the big play. So when he's back, if you need a big week out of your flex option, feel free to throw him in. But he's not that reliable, consistent target for now that he once was in his days in Houston.
I would take 5 catches out of Henry Ruggs tonight. I need him to win me a fantasy league. I have a full PPR. I'm down 13, so I would take 5 catches really. But moving on to tight ends because everybody hates the tight end position, and it just got thinner. Logan Thomas hurt his hamstring, and awaiting updates, we expect that he may miss a week or two because skill position players, especially wide receivers and tight ends, do tend to miss a couple of weeks with hamstrings, but we don't know yet. We'll keep you updated on our Thursday show, but pull out the dartboard again, I guess.
Yeah, Logan Thomas was the last guy I would say was a weekly starter that like you should have confidence on, and he goes out and gets hurt. So hopefully, like you mentioned, it's just a 1 or 2 week injury, and he's back out there. But that's most of the big injury news and big stories around the NFL. We're into the heart of it. In the old years, we'd be a quarter of the way through. I'm not smart enough to do what 4 out of 17 statistically is in my head. So we're almost a quarter, maybe a little bit over. I don't know. Not quite a quarter, but anyways, that's all the news we got today. So it's time for George's favorite segment, Quotes of the Week.
It's a good thing we are not a math show and we are a quote show. No, really. Cody, you added a cool quote from the Texans. Why don't you start it off with that one? I'll give you a little bit of love here in this segment.
Alrighty. So David Culley, head coach of the Houston Texans, he came out and said that, this loss was on me. I didn't have the team prepared. Well, obviously they lost 40-0, but the quote that caught my eye was the Texans offense wouldn't have played well even with Joe Montana out there. Joe Montana, Super Bowl winning Hall of Fame quarterback, most important position, gunslinger. If you wouldn't, the offense wouldn't have played well. Like, I'm not even talking about winning. We're talking about played well. Um, that's alarming. Like, I understand, like, you have a rookie quarterback, you have a lot of new starters, you have the Deshaun Watson off the field distraction, him not wanting to be there. But to say a Hall of Fame quarterback wouldn't even make your offense play well, there is something deeper going on in Houston. And Texans fans, I'm sorry, but it's going to be a long, long season for you guys.
So, does this just mean something happened really bad in the last 3 weeks, or does this mean Tyrod Taylor is a far above and beyond Hall of Fame quarterback? Because he put up 35 points, like, in week 1.
Hey, you never disrespect Virginia Tech legend Tyrod Taylor.
I'm not
But
disrespecting him, but I'm just wondering, like, what happened to the culture of that team between week 1 when they looked like a solid offense to now you take him out and they wouldn't even have played well with him or Joe Montana?
yeah, I don't, maybe he, it's a week to week league, and maybe he already forgot about the week one. Maybe he, you know, chalked it up to them playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. But like you said,
Maybe.
Tyrod did look good. I tend to think if you would have had Joe Montana out there, maybe you'd play a little bit better, or at least
I
considered
would hope
well
so.
enough. Um, but talking of matchups, there was some drama at the end of the Broncos Ravens game. I was going to ask your opinion on it, but you have two quotes, one from each head coach. So why don't you give them to us both, and then we can talk a little bit about how that game ended.
All right. I got to set the fans up in case they did not know what happened. So, Ravens are cruising to a victory. I believe they're up 23-7 with one play left in the game. The Ravens have this record where they have, I believe it's 41 consecutive games of 100 team rushing yards or more. They were at 96 team rushing yards with one play left, and instead of calling a kneel down, they ran a little run to the outside with Lamar Jackson, who got 5 or 6 yards and kneeled to get there. I think at 102 on the day. So the Broncos obviously took offense to not kneeling the ball and going for their record because it's rubbing it in. We'll start off with how John Harbaugh described it in his post-game press conference. He said, 100% my call. That's one of those things that's meaningful. It's one of those things that as a head coach, you've got to be mindful of your team and your players and your coaches and what it means to them. So he called it because his team knew that this was a thing. This is now an NFL record for consecutive games with 100 rushing yards, and his team was so fired up to get to that record. So that's why he felt he needed to call that play and get them up to that 100 rushing yards. The Broncos on the other side, head coach Vic Fangio said, "I thought it was kind of bull, I'll bleep it, but I expected it from them. That's their mode of operation. Player safety is secondary." So he hated it not only because it felt like it was rubbing it in, but he feels like you're putting players at unnecessary danger on a play that should have just been a kneel down. So I don't necessarily see a problem with it, but I get the Broncos side. Cody, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, props to the guy for knowing where he is in the record books and knowing how much for that rushing team, how important that is to him. Something so small could be a huge game changer for the moment. They got 4 yards, and then Lamar slid. I actually think it was 6 yards, and then Lamar slid.
Mhm.
No harm, no foul. I did love that Harbaugh did clap it back a little bit today after the Fangio comments and was like, he said, I wasn't aware of a 16-point play, so why were the Broncos throwing the ball into the end zone with 10 seconds left? I mean, that has nothing to do with
Oh,
winning. So a little bit of drama going back there. I mean, but to that same point though, like if you're going to complain how they play at the end of the game, if you're down 16 points, why are you trying to score? I mean, it was a good counterpoint. Like, I mean, we all talk about moral victory. So like you want your team to like never give up and, you know, push to score and score as many points as possible, even when it's out of reach. You want to see that fire out of your team. And unfortunately, for the Ravens, the fire was we want to keep this record. We want it, you know, we don't want to just tie it. We want to break it next week. We want to be this all-time rushing team, which they have potential to do. No harm, no foul for me. Um, and it does seem a little bit like Vic Fangio is one of the older coaches in the NFL. Just he's still stuck in his old ways. It's just like all those people out there complaining about the jersey numbers. I know not even everyone on this podcast likes the new jersey numbers because that's not how the old way of football is. But sometimes the new way of football changes things and takes things over. So no harm, no foul, and props to John Harbaugh for making that call.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of do wish Tyler was here to debate this one because I know he would have more of a problem with what the Ravens did because of what happened with the Ravens in the playoffs last year. There is a bit of a reputation, I guess, even though I don't know if they've ever particularly, done anything for, a reason to be harmful. This was not supposed to be harmful. It was just supposed to be for the morale of the guys, but it could be taken that way because of what has happened in the past. But no more reason to
Yeah,
really dwell on that, I guess.
I would love to
Go
hear
ahead.
Snyder's opinion. I wish, like you said, I do wish he was here. Because was it last year? Was it that when the game was over, they put Henry in for one play to like get him over a
Yeah,
certain
that
number
was
of
week
yards?
17. And I think that was to get him over 2,000.
They put him in for one play. So like this isn't the first time it's happened. Uh, the Broncos are just mad
Well,
because
I guess it wasn't one play, it was one drive. But yes, you're right.
so it's not the first time it happened. It won't be the last. But like you said, that's probably enough talking about that matchup from last week because we need to start looking forward to this week, and we're going to help you out with some week 5 waivers.
Almost tripped you up there, Cody, on the rundown. I had week 4 on there. We are in week 5 now. Looking forward. I can start us off this week. And sticking with the Ravens, we had a surprise inactive of Tyson Williams, healthy scratch this week because Le'Veon Bell was active. Now, Le'Veon Bell was not really active in the game. He had 4 carries. It wasn't really anything to write home about, but the takeaway is Latavius Murray. We thought he had a chance to take over that backfield when he was signed. He was eased in. It seemed like because Tyson Williams was playing well, he was going to be the lead back. He is now seemingly out of the picture. And Latavius Murray had 18 carries this week. Did not put in a particularly great performance. He did score a touchdown, so he had a solid fantasy day, but if he's going to be getting 18 carries, we know that the lead rusher in this Ravens offense has to be owned, could even be potentially startable most weeks. Right now, that is Latavius Murray, who's only owned in about 20% of NFL.com leagues.
Yeah, I love the Latavius Murray edition. I know we debated this a little bit when he was signed on who we thought would become the lead back. I know the numbers weren't great, but like you mentioned, he had 18 carries. And even though the Ravens did, we just talked about it, they went over 100 rushing yards. They finished with 102 team total rushing yards. The Denver Broncos still are only averaging 70 yards given up against opponents this year. So it is a very good run defense. Latavius Murray definitely has some value. If he's still not out, if he's still out there because he's only owned in 20% of leagues, definitely go get him. I'm gonna, keep talking some running backs that are barely owned. I'm gonna give you 2 of them. It's a little 2 for 1 here. And it's both because their lead back, we don't know their injury status. It could be anywhere from week to week to a few weeks. I'm going to start it off with Damian Williams. He's 1.3% owned. He's the guy I'm going out and getting because I think there's potential for Montgomery to miss more time than the next guy, which is Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. Samaje was already starting to eat into some of the third down opportunities. We know the Bengals like to give the ball to the running back. He's only 0.2% owned, especially if you're a Mixon owner out there. I would think this is a guy you're going to target, maybe spend a little bit extra fab dollars. You shouldn't have to break the bank for him. He's not going to be a guy, but if you have Mixon, he would be a guy that I'm targeting. 2 guys, both under 2% owned, have potential to be a week starter this week. Might not be there for your team long term, so it might not be a guy like Latavius Murray who could actually end up being a multiple week starter. But if you're in a pinch for this week, go get one of those guys.
I really like Damian Williams. I did actually have him in my article on the couchgms.com, so feel free to go over and check that out. I suggested you don't really break the fab bank on him because we don't know the status of Montgomery. If for whatever reason it comes out and it says that Montgomery is going to miss significant time, more than just a week or two, he'll hit IR. He may miss even longer if the injury is worse than we thought. Then definitely go break the bank on Damian Williams. We can keep you updated on Twitter Make sure you're following us on Twitter. But
Yeah, not
he's
Facebook
somebody
since
I
it's down.
really like. Yeah, Facebook is still down. I don't know. We're recording this on Monday night. I feel like it's already been 5 hours, but we do post more news on Twitter. So if you are a follower on Facebook, go follow us on Twitter as well. You get a little bit of bonus content when it comes to injuries and other news. I'll move on to the wide receiver position. Here's a guy who's not quite as widely owned, but somebody who snuck off of the injured reserve last week and put in like basically his warm-up game. Curtis Samuel for the Washington football team. He is about 60% owned, but he, I think, is going to really come into his own in that offense. He had 4 catches, like I said. He was kind of sparingly used. That team has never had a number 2 wide receiver. They now may have lost Logan Thomas for a few weeks too, so they need somebody to jump right in. I see him being a big star by the end of this season.
Yeah, Debo Samuel. That is not the guy I'm talking about. We're talking about Curtis Samuel.
Yep.
Trust me, I am paying attention to what George is saying. I know sometimes it may appear that I'm drifting off, but no. Curtis Samuel, definitely like him, especially with Logan Thomas potentially missing time. The guy that could do those mid-crossing routes, the security blanket for Taylor Heineke.
Get some
Love.
carries, at least he used to in Carolina as well. I don't know if Washington's going to use him that way.
Yep, and he was there with Ron Rivera in Carolina, so don't forget that. That's one of the reasons they did sign him. But since I did talk about Debo Samuel, I'm going to talk about the guy throwing him the ball now, and that is quarterback Trey Lance. Now, again, I mentioned at the top of the show, temper some expectations. I understand, it was a half of football. He hit some wide open guys. He did only throw 157 yards in that half. He only had a 50% completion rating. But the one thing you do need to know is that he had 7 rushing attempts for 41 yards in that second half. We saw him already come in goal line situations. He scored in week 3 against the Packers. I believe he threw a pass in week 1 at the goal line on a read option, RPO type play. So they were already using him in the goal line, and now he's going to be the full-time starter. They're still going to be a run-first team. Like they're going to live on the run. They like to build off the run. George Kittle was a little banged up. They were unsure. He did play, so he's might not be at full strength. Debo Samuel has looked really good. Hopefully, Brandon Ayuk comes back around. We're still holding out hope for that one. But Trey Lance, you probably weren't excited to play Jimmy Garoppolo, and you're probably not going to get much better passing output from Trey Lance, especially at first from a rookie. But we talk about all the time, a running quarterback is a cheat code in the NFL. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. It's Tyler's not here. I'm to give you a little bit of bold prediction, but go out and get Trey Lance because if you're a smart fantasy commissioner or in a smart fantasy league, you're playing your fantasy championship in week 16, not week 17, but in week 16, the 49ers have the Houston Texans. So call your shot now. Go get Trey Lance as your championship quarterback and a guy that, honestly, if he starts the rest of the year and doesn't get this job back, he could end up as a top 12 quarterback based on his rushing ability alone.
Wow. Bold hit on the fantasy playoff ending in week 16 still. I thought we liked an extra week in fantasy football, but I guess not all of us do. The biggest
You know what?
thing that I
I'm not
think.
going to lie. I just
uh,
totally botched my numbers. They do play in
okay.
week 17 and there's 18 weeks. I knew there were 17 games, but I forgot about the bye weeks because bye weeks haven't started yet. They start next week, so be prepared. But yes, we're still just
Okay.
don't end on week 18. So everything I
Okay,
just
good.
said, don't have your championships week 18, have them week 17, and they play the Houston Texans week 17. Not a complete idiot, just a 50% idiot.
He's just not good with numbers because, like we said earlier in the show, we're not a math show. We're a quote show. No, we're a fantasy football show. But I think what I want to put in is this: if Trey Lance plays well, he has a chance to win the job, similar to what we said with Justin Fields. And that having Trey Lance as their quarterback would really, I think, boost their run game. I think you're going to have people like Debo Samuel are going to be fine. George Kittle is going to be fine. But this reinforces the fact that Cody's been saying, Jeff Wilson, stash him. He could be big when he comes off a pup. And if they're going to be an even more run-centric team than they already are, even more so.
And they also play the Houston Texans week 17. So
Good running back week 17, good quarterback week 17, all good things. But let's stop looking too far ahead and go back to now because everyone's
Playoffs.
still playing tight end darts. And I have my tight end dart for the week, and it's somebody who we said last week we shouldn't go chasing fantasy points. Well, maybe we're not chasing fantasy points. I don't know. Dalton Schultz. He has now had 2 straight good weeks. He's still getting targets. I think he was at 5 again this week, which for tight ends, that's invaluable. You can't buy targets as tight ends, it seems like, outside of the top 5 or 6. So if I had to play tight end darts this week, this guy's only 45.5% owned. Go get Dalton Schultz. That Cowboys offense is prolific. It's going to keep going. It's almost like the Bills. The Bills have so many weapons, but it seems like the tight end is getting enough involved that he's going to be in the top tier of tight ends.
Yeah, that's another great point. 45.4% owned for tight end number 3 on the season in half point scoring. So again, tight ends haven't been great outside of Travis Kelce. My guy is also a tight end that I'm going to talk about, and he is going to be replacing the current tight end number 2, Rob Gronkowski, who came out and did not play on Sunday, and it came out that he had cracked ribs and one even punctured his lung. So his timetable for return is up in the air. Now, I know that offense didn't look great on Sunday night against the Patriots. There was a lot of emotion in that game. It was wet, terrible conditions. They're going to bounce back. It's still the Patriots, or excuse me, it's still the Buccaneers. They're going to be throwing it all over the yard. And I know everybody loves OJ Howard, wants him to go to a different team, but the guy that's always stealing the red zone targets, the guy that's always there and been Mr. Reliable is Cameron Breit. So if you need a tight end, put him up on the dartboard, close your eyes, and throw. And if it lands on Cameron Breit, who's only 3.3% owned, it's not a bad option for fantasy, especially if you lost a guy like Logan Thomas, or you missed out on Dawson Knox last week. Tyler Conklin let you down. There's so many, like, I don't want to say mid tier because I feel like it's either Travis Kelce and then the rest. I maybe
At this point, yeah.
Darren Waller hasn't played yet at the time of recording, so he could easily jump up to tight end 2 or 3. So these numbers might be a little skewed if Waller has a big game this week. But even like TJ Hawkinson, who after 2 weeks we are like, this is the dude. Well, the next 2 weeks he's slowed up because the Lions aren't that good. So Cameron Brate, he's on a good offense, like you mentioned with Dalton Schultz. Those are 2 guys you should definitely be picking up if you're in tight end purgatory, like most of us out there.
I also want to mention, you're saying if you missed out on Dawson Knox, you can get Dalton Schultz. Dawson Knox was not very widely added either. He's the one guy in my waiver wire column that I put as my tight end. He's only 46.4% owned in NFL.com leagues, 1 whole percent more than Dalton Schultz. So he's still out there in a lot of places too. There's plenty of dart throw tight end options who have looked fairly reliable lately, which, I mean, I don't want to get my hopes up too much because all these guys are probably going to bust next week now. But
Probably.
we can't help that.
We're trying. We're trying to figure it out just like all of you guys out there. So those are some of our favorite waiver wire picks up. There's a few more. If you're debating between a few guys, feel free. You can always reach out to us, shoot us a DM on Instagram, probably Twitter, because Facebook and Instagram are probably still down. But if they're back up, we'll be glad to take your DMs on those. Or you can even
Or
submit.
send us on the couchgms.com.
See, same wavelength right there. We were going to say the exact same thing. But before we get out of this show, we do have to do a little bit of Thursday night preview. And this one is a doozy. Now, last week, I'm pretty sure it came out, it was like the most watched Thursday night game of digital and streaming, and it was the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals. Some of that you can align that with, it was the young quarterbacks battling it out. This week, we have the Rams, who suffered their first loss, and the Seattle Seahawks, who bounced back against the San Francisco 49er, a huge divisional matchup on Thursday night. I'm actually surprised a game of this magnitude is going to be played on a Thursday night game on a short week. On a short week, I think it would have to favor Seattle going there. I know it's not that a huge travel day for the Rams coming from LA, but definitely something to monitor. Stafford and Cooper Kupp Stafford still looked pretty good, but Cooper Kupp, he came back to earth a little bit, and they seemed to, hit a speed bump in coming back against the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a legit team. Some people were a little worried about them because they barely escaped the Vikings. They weren't leading at halftime against the Jacksonville Jaguars, so but they looked legit against the Rams. I think it's safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daryl Henderson is still the lead back when healthy. Sonny Michel did in fantasy, he did some things. He got a few carries, but in fantasy, he did absolutely nothing. Daryl Henderson, he's back in your starting lineups. Make sure he's in a running back spot, not a flex spot. But the Rams wide receivers, Cooper
Yeah.
Kupp are still going to play, even though he had a down game for him. But Van Jefferson got involved, Deshaun Jackson. There's still some, Bobby Tree truthers out there. What are your thoughts on those guys, and how would you rank them heading into this matchup against the Seattle Seahawks?
Now, I had to go and look at some stats for Bobby Trees because I saw he came back a little bit, and it's kind of funny how are these guys gonna start becoming the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett kind of thing here? Like, I mean, it looked like it was gonna be all Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp comes back down to earth, and all of a sudden Bobby Trees puts up 13 points. So are we going to start seeing a back and forth here? I kind of hope not. At the same time, I kind of hope we do, because then Robert Woods will actually be a fantasy relevant wide receiver again, which I like to see. I don't really feel comfortable starting any of those Rams wide receivers unless they're Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. Just because I feel like, we all know what Deshaun Jackson is. Deshaun Jackson has to go out there and catch a long touchdown in order to be fantasy relevant 95% of weeks. So if you want to go out there and hit a home run, say you're a last place team trying to face the first place team, and you want a chance at a 20-point week from a wide receiver, maybe you play Deshaun Jackson. I don't particularly like Van Jefferson, even though he's been playing well, because I still feel like he has to be third on the pecking order behind Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. So, with me not being completely confident playing Robert Woods as a wide receiver, I don't see anybody that I'm confident playing besides Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford and Daryl Henderson.
Yeah, it's tough for me because in half point PPR, Van Jefferson is outscoring Robert Woods currently by 3 points, so take that with a grain of salt. But Robert Woods has 7 more targets. They're both tied at 2 touchdowns. They both seem to be very, they're not Robert Woods and Van Jefferson are closer now. They're not Robert Woods just a clear guy ahead of them. I would say that. You can't forget about Tyler Higbee there. Sometimes he eats into those snaps. And we're
10
talking
and
about
darts.
Robert. Yep, we talk about Robert Woods having a good week at 13 and Cooper Kupp coming back to earth, but they were like 2 points different. It's just because Cooper Kupp was shot out of a cannon for his fantasy output in week 1, week 2, and week 3. But you did mention Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Are they both startable for this week? I know Tyler Lockett did play, but he was having the injury issues, so something to monitor on a short week. Something could always flare up, and he might be limited. And then Alex Collins, he had 10 carries, and Chris Carson wasn't hurt. Chris Carson hasn't been. It's just like that time of the year. Like Chris Carson, he didn't fumble. Surprisingly, I mean that's normally his thing. Like he gets a few
I
fumbles, but
I
what
don't
is
know
your
if
thought
Chris
on that
Carson
backfield?
wasn't hurt. I don't know if Chris Carson wasn't hurt though. Because, like, we take from that week 3 game that Tyler Lockett had his knee twisted up all weird, and we all thought he was going to be, really hurt. Ends up being a hip injury. Might have been why he was a little slow. He still had 5 targets. I would watch his injury status and make sure that he is going to be a full go before you play him. But I'll probably be playing him regardless because of how good, he can be. When it comes to Alex Collins, I don't know if Chris Carson wasn't hurt, because Chris Carson also missed time in week 3 because of a hamstring injury. No one seems to remember it because Tyler Lockett overshadowed it. Chris Carson still did work back in the rest of the game. He might have been limited because of that. Does that worry me on a short week? Definitely, because he has less time to heal now coming into the next week. But now being 1.5 weeks out of the hamstring injury, maybe he'll be up to 100% again. Maybe he will be getting his full share of carries. I'm not playing another running back in that backfield unless they tell me Chris Carson is inactive.
Okay, that makes sense. And they do. Are you picking up Alex Collins on waivers? I know it's a short week. Like, is he a guy you might throw even like $1 in Fab or like your second round if you're a waiver priority in the event that he does? And if let's say if Chris Carson doesn't play, would you feel more confident starting Damian Williams or Alex Collins?
I'm more confident starting Damian Williams. I think the track record for Damian Williams is a little bit better. If he ends up being someone you lose in the first round of waivers and you're a Chris Carson owner and you're picking him up in the second round, like you said, then I would not have a problem starting Alex Collins if you see that Chris Carson's inactive. Just again, don't play him unless you see that's the case.
And then last one, real quick, since we're talking like these running backs that are for guys. And again, this is only we don't know the status of him. This only is if Chris Carson is still dealing with a hamstring and isn't back for on a short week. Alex Collins or Samaje Perine, like because I feel like those guys are a little bit closer than Damian Williams. So let me
Yeah.
get your opinion on those.
I would probably lean P. Ryan because of pass catching ability. He kind of took the Giovanni Bernard role in Cincinnati in a way. He's starting to work into that at least. So, because if you're in a standard, I might lean Alex Collins. Half PPR, I'm going P. Ryan.
Makes sense to me. And then one more thing I do want to talk about a little bit is Gerald Everett. He might be back from the COVID list, and he might not make it back for the Thursday night game, but something to keep an eye on. But no tight end really stepped up in his absence against the 49ers. The guy with the most targets from the tight end position was Will Dissly. Um, sure, if Everett is out there and you want to throw another guy on the dartboard, maybe, but I think there's a little bit, there's a few more options out there. So
If there was
unless
no
you
Everett
disagree.
there, we know how Disley was so good in the past. He just couldn't stay on the field. He kept getting hurt. With another tight end of Everett's caliber in there, taking away snaps, taking away targets, I don't like Disley. I just think of what could be for another 3 weeks if we had Will Disley with nobody else there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Um, so that's your Thursday night game. As always, remember to put those players in their selected position. If you're starting Chris Carson, make sure he's in a running back. If you have Tyler Lockett, make sure he's in a wide receiver. You don't want to get caught with them in your flex, and you need to swap somebody else on Sunday or even Monday. But before we do wrap up this show, I do. I saw something on TikTok because it's not down. I'm going to keep making jokes about Facebook being down because that's the trendy thing to do. And
Maybe it'll still be down when we post this tomorrow.
It's about Seattle Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson. And Tyler is not here because of a work commitment. He was not going to be here at any point, and so he's definitely not here after the Titans did lose in overtime to the New York Jets. But that game came down to a Randy Bullock missed field goal that would have tied the game. So this idea from Russell Wilson plays into eliminating ties in the NFL. We didn't get one in Week 4, but we were very close. And I want to get your opinion on it. We'll break it down a little bit. Russell Wilson's idea is if you go the whole 10 minutes without either team scoring or both teams scores the field goal and nobody takes the lead. After the
Mhm.
10 minutes, they do another coin toss. The away team obviously gets the call because they're the away team. Heads or tails, the winner of the coin toss gets to decide a field goal kick from the 35-yard line, which makes it a 53-yard field goal. You either you either pick to kick it or you have the other team kick it. One field goal operation. It is played like a normal field goal, so it's not just the kicker lining up there. Like you play it, field goal block and everything. Sure, maybe you can even ice the kicker if you want. But if the kick goes in, that team wins. If the kick is misses, the other team wins. I mean, it's a very crazy, odd. Never heard anything like that for, how to end a sports game. Literally, the game would be decided on a kick. I know there are some people that want to eradicate kickers, not just from fantasy.
You.
So no, I just don't want to get them out of fantasy. I do think they have a value in the NFL,
Mhm.
but there's guys out there that are this as passionate about it I am with no kickers in fantasy as they are in the NFL. What are your thoughts on this potential? And I'm not going to call it a potential rule change. Like I don't ever see it happening, but it's just a fun story that I wanted to get your guys' advice or get your advice and
So I actually really like the idea. I'm a little upset that no one's thought of it sooner. And I mean, it seems like it's ridiculous for football fans. It's like, why would we want, a kicker to kick a field goal and it's a make or miss, win or loss? I don't know. That just seems silly. But when you think back to other sports, nationally and internationally, it like similar ideas happen all the time in soccer or football, depending on where you're listening to us from. You have penalty kicks. So In that case, you have 3 rounds, just someone kicking on a goalkeeper and, the team to score the most goals wins. Hockey is similar. They have a shootout. One-on-one, shooter and goalie, and you go and see who scores more in 3 rounds or however long it takes to have one actually break out. So I almost want to take Russell Wilson's rule and take it a step further and have a kickoff. Not like an actual kickoff like you start
I
a game
got you.
with, but
So, like, start at the 25-yard line, and every kick that's good, move it back 5.
yeah,
Oh,
or
here's
even 10 if you wanted to or whatever, and then maybe you have, like, a limit of, like, it stops at 55 because after that, if you get to 65, it'd be ridiculous or whatever, but and then you just go until one kicker misses and one kicker makes it.
interesting. That'd be a fun idea for sure. They could always improve the NFL game, but before we worry about overtime, maybe we can fix the officiating because it is getting terrible on both sides. I don't care what team you're on. I'm sure you can argue that you had a bad call against you. Uh, they, again, I feel like I'm seeing more and more every week. Like we're don't understand what a catch is. Um, w- it's getting a little rough. Like maybe we need to look into that. Um, and then there's one more thing I do have to ask you.
Mhm.
It's a quote from running back Mike Davis. Now it's from August. I've been meaning to mention it because it's just a fun quote and it has you think. It's almost a question. And he tweets out on August 30th, "How is cereal not considered a soup?"
First off, I love that we brought this podcast back to food because anytime we talk about food, it's a good time. This
Is
has vibes of is hot dog a sandwich to me, and I still never figured out a good answer to that, so I don't even know if I wanna get into this rabbit hole. That is a great question.
Yeah, like if you think about it, what is there's a broth, which is the milk,
Mhm.
and then chunks of stuff, which would be
Well,
the cereal.
so I guess the qualifying factor has to be, is soup supposed to be warm? Like, is cold soup a thing? I don't know of cold soup being a thing.
I'm sure there's cold soup out there. I'm guarantee you there's people out there that like just eat soup out of the can. Like they don't heat it up; they just crack the
Okay.
can and eat it.
So if you're one of those people that does that, or if you know of a cold soup recipe, please hit us up because we want to make sure for a fact that cold soup's a thing.
Yeah, and so that's a great question to end it on. A hot dog is a sandwich, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's where I stand on that one. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna consider cereal a soup until someone convinces me otherwise why it's not. But this has been a fun show as always. A lot of waiver wire breakdowns. As always, make sure you're checking out the couchgms.com for George's full breakdown. Enjoy the Thursday night game. It should be a doozy. As always, thank you for listening. And remember, this podcast is more fun for you and more fun for us when you get involved.
Thank you all one more time for checking out the Couch GMs podcast. We'll be back at you later in the week to preview the rest of Week 5 after Thursday Night Football. For Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see you all later in the week.